Hey, everybody. So I wanted to check in. Um, I see that there haven't been any questions posted in the questions thread thus far, but that there's some great discussion happening elsewhere. I'm seeing a lot of things in the Trans Basics board that I definitely want to address. So there's a few different things that people are bringing up. Um, Definitely a lot of people are wanting to get terminology right, which is awesome. What I would make sure of is just use the word transgender um, or a transgender person. Tip at this point, adding the ed or calling someone or referring to people as transgenders is definitely seen as less polite. For the ed, think of it would be similar to saying that someone's blacked as opposed to black. Um, Transgender person, usually, or transgender people, usually the right way to go. Some people thought that for someone to be transgender or trans only meant two options, that it was somebody who started off as one and became another. Definitely not the case. There's a lot more to gender than that. There are some people who are saying that, well, this isn't talked about in history class. I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure if this is true. Um, Actually, there's a lot of documentation here. First off, the concepts of gender that we have in our culture, a lot more recent than we think they are. The concept of having people who are in some way on the trans spectrum or in some way identify as transgender, it's a pretty old one and it's a pretty well documented one. We know that there have been people around who are part of different communities that are in some way gender variant, not playing into what we think of as a gender binary in our culture. There's a group in India, I believe the Hijira, that it's just a traditional thing. There's a concept in a lot of Native American tribes of someone being two-spirit. Again, that's a form of transness. It's been around a very long time. There's a group in Mexico. There's groups all over the place where it's cultural groups that are in some way variant from what we would consider a traditional gender binary. This has been around. Um, and we know that there's a lot of documentation going back through time that our ideas of sex, gender, sexuality, romance, a lot of this is a lot more recent than we think. We kind of assume at this point that romantic love between a man and a woman has always been the norm, and it really hasn't. Not as much as we tend to believe. Um, the concept of there being more than two genders, I get that that can be a stretch for people if you've just grown up seeing there's two options, but it's definitely broader than that. And there are definitely some people who kind of reject the binary altogether and prefer to refer to themselves as gender queer or agendered and just kind of, yeah, this is not something I want to define myself by. In fact, the concept of there being more than two sexes is actually one that throws people a lot, but it's the case. We know that there are a lot of people who are some version of intersexed, where they're not falling directly into male or female, that they're born either physically with both sets of genitalia, that there might be something genetic, like somebody who has Klinefelters, where they've got XXY chromosome, where they typically will present to most people as they think they're, that they would read as male, but they are they're intersexed. They have two X chromosomes and a Y, just, like a woman with the male chromosome added on. And they're frequently, there's different issues that come up because of some of those things. There's a lot of cases where sex doesn't even pull into the binary that many people think it does. It's a lot more complex. There are historical cases where a baby would be born that was in some way variant between, looking strictly male or strictly female. And there are cases going back medically where a doctor would just make a decision of, what should be there and what shouldn't, and frankly, remove what they didn't think shouldn't be there. Or cases where parents made decisions. So this is stuff that has been around and that we know about. Why are we seeing this more now? Because more people are able to talk about it, feel as though they can come out, feel as though in our connected era they want to come out. I mean, if you think about the saint that we read about, who was a transgendered male who basically used the habit as a transition, why would he have come out? Or even if he had wanted to come out and came out, it wouldn't be something we'd have a record of. It's not like we could look back at his Facebook page or see emails about it or, see newspaper articles about it. The age of communication we're in also changes what our concepts are of public and private to some degree, if you think about it. Let me look at some of these other great comments. People are asking about the legal ramifications and getting a driver's license. That varies really widely. A good friend of mine was born in the Cleveland area like I was, and he transitioned and moved to Chicago, and that's where his transition happened. And when he was there, for him to change his documentation in Chicago, he had to go back home to Cleveland, get a certified birth certificate, and talk to the state of Ohio, and then get them to talk to Illinois, and it was a whole thing. Other people, I think it very much varies by state on the degree of hoops they make you jump through. As far as I am aware, there is not an across-the-board national standard. I think that's a state thing. And it's definitely, I mean, if you think about it, it's very much something that you would want to make sure is changed. After all, your appearance is going to be wildly different, Anyone flown recently and had them look at a driver's license a bit too long because your hair was different? Imagine transitioning genders. Ooh, it's going to be real different. It's something that it's really important that people are able to get documentation that matches their identity. Why do you think that there are gender stereotypes? Oh, I wish I knew. And we very much play into it. And I think for some people, that can help drive some of the kind of checking out of gender because we're so stereotyped as to behavior. And we really have suppositions both for men and women, for cis men and cis women, of like, this is how you act. And again, gender's performative. There would be a point where I would have had to put on lipstick to be teaching, where it wasn't just a decision I was making, where I had to put on earrings, as opposed to something I want to do. All of our markers of physical gender, of physical gendering ourselves, are kind of exhausting. And then also some of the suppositions we make about the way that, genders should act. that people who are male should act a certain way, that people who are female should act a certain way. Um, why are there gender stereotypes is an excellent question. I think there's a lot of possible reasons. I think some of it is people buying into what society is telling them or what others are telling them about who they should be as a person. Or our social agreements on, okay, you act that way, I'll act this way, and never the twain shall meet. But we know that that a lot of the gender stereotypes damage both men and women. Think of how many guys have been told they can't cry, or that it's not okay for them to admit they have feelings. That damages men a lot. Um, Who's to say that pink is a female color if across the world it's male? Actually, it wasn't too long ago that blue was the color for girls and pink was the color for boys, because pink was the paler version of red, and red was masculine and vigorous. You know, blue's the color of the Virgin Mary's cloak and peaceful. And you see how this stuff is weird? Because this stuff is weird. There are so many variables involved. It's stereotyping because it gets set in one area. But that said, what's appropriate for one gender in one area at one time in one culture, it definitely changes. It definitely does matter what other people think or say if they don't treat you as the person you know you are. I mean, if I insisted that your name was different or that you were different as a person, and I treated you in line with my expectations, that would start to be kind of painful after a while, potentially. Violence is definitely a huge issue that transgender people have to deal with. It's kind of scary, particularly as you guys read, trans women, particularly trans women of color. The number of trans women who get attacked and killed is pretty staggering, and pretty terrifying. You need to let people be the people they want to be. Sing it. Sing it, Brittany. Or sorry, Taylor. That's Taylor, you're 100% right. People aren't necessarily good at that. Another thing that people aren't necessarily good at is saying that, well, I don't understand something, so if I don't understand you, you're the one in the wrong. It's not necessarily other people's responsibility to make themselves understandable to you. Whether or not you understand them is kind of your issue. At least this is something that I've discovered for myself as time's gone by. There are lots of things. When the first trans person that I knew well, my friend Aiden, the one I mentioned from Chicago, when he came out to me, I was really freaked out. We had been really close friends when he was presenting as a woman, and I'm like, well, you know, you're one of my closest female friends, and now you're a female, and what the heck? And realizing that that was my problem and not his was something that took a while and was really difficult. And realizing at different points when he was figuring things out that he'd throw things out and I was like, that's weird, or I'm not, you know, I don't understand. Well, it's kind of my responsibility as his friend to kind of get to understand. And it's also my responsibility as his friend to kind of say, there's some of your choices I don't understand, but I love you and respect you as a fellow person and human anyway. And, you know, as my friend. And maybe that's all, you know, what all of us need to get better at. I don't know. I'll get off my soapbox. Um, so it looks like people are reading and thinking about things, which is super. Really glad to see that. The écriture transféminine, it's definitely, I'm definitely asking you to stretch a little in this one. I know this is a weird question. Kind of did it on purpose. Especially since when we first read Sixu, so many people, when they first read that piece, Laugh of the Medusa, pardon me, really buy into it as very biologically essentialist, that men write a certain way because of male bodies, women write a certain way because of women's bodies. And again, biological sex itself isn't that simple, let alone gender. So I kind of am deliberately throwing this out and throwing out kind of a weird question, or something to think about. Definitely when I'm throwing out that I want you guys to re-examine something with a theory in mind or with a theorist in mind, see what looking at the work you're re-examining, with that theory in mind, does it show you something else? Do you see something else? That's what we talk about in studying literature as a theoretical lens. If you look at a piece of work with Sixu and the theory of écriture féminine in mind, do you see it differently? So that's what we're talking about here. So this is absolutely 100% a tough and weird question, and that's okay. This is one that might stump you a little. Think through it, and really, when you engage it, give me some detail. But I know I'm asking a hard one there, and if you want to, that's definitely something we can talk about tomorrow night. These pieces are very different, kind of all over the map in a lot of ways. Janet Mock, out of all the trans women here, probably the one you're most likely to have heard of. She's pretty well known, and her memoirs are great, well worth reading. Gwen Benaway, the pieces that you're reading, A Body Like a Home, is definitely graphic. It's definitely very straightforward, and I can't imagine writing that piece for her, because that's more detail than I'd share or than I feel comfortable with sharing with anyone about my body. It's really brave of her. And if you have moments when you read it that feel a little uncomfortable, that's okay. It's totally cool for you to feel as though this is a lot of detail, because it is. Try to think about how it felt for her writing it, because she felt like someone needed to say this or share this. I cannot imagine, truly. The rest of the pieces really are all over the place, but there's some stuff in here that I think is really great reads. Actually, several of these women have books out that have come out recently in some cases. Actually, Plet's book has come out, and she's released a free PDF of it online, and it's her collection of short stories. I'm absolutely going to read that soon. Other than that, this week's definitely a turn, but it's on purpose, and I hope it's making sense to you. Do let me know if you've got questions as you move along. And again, I'm going to do the meetup tomorrow night, 6 o'clock, unless people want to do something else as well at another time. Let me know. I'll see what I can do. And hopefully I'll be able to chat with some of you then. Take care, okay? Bye.